Thanks so much for joining us tonight. Welcome to the presentation by Anthony Visco on behalf of the Catholic Art Institute. We are really pleased and excited to have Anthony this evening to share his presentation of the Maesta and the Art of the Sacred Conversation. This is one in a series of talks that Anthony has been giving, many of which have been online through the Dominicans of St. Patrick's, and I can share a link to that when we publish this website if you want to see any of the other presentations. But we are so glad that you're here. Thanks for joining us. And without further ado, Anthony, why don't you just take the floor now? Thanks again for joining us tonight.
Thanks for hosting this, Kathleen, and the Catholic Art Institute for hosting this. My interest in sacred conversation, I've never seen anything like that before I started studying Florence, and of course most of them are in museums now, and but it was something that struck me because, well, we don't have a lot in our churches here in the States, and but the more I studied them, the more I just became interested in what they were about and their history and the evolution of them. And I'd like to take it to where we are now, or where we aren't, and where we could be. So let me start this again here. Oh no, I just undid it. Sorry. Oh boy. Here we go. Let's see if this works. When I look at these lightened paintings and you look at it and you say, well, what's going on here? And you realize that what's happening is it's a parade of the Cimabue in Florence. It was an annual event where they actually took this painting that had been in a church, and on certain feasts, you can see it's sort of a portable altar that they're taking out, parading it through the streets of Florence. So these things were based on sort of the Italo-Byzantine idea of the icon. There was a sense of genuine presence here with the Maesta paintings. Maesta, by the way, means majesty. So it was always Our Lady enthroned, Our Lady in majesty, surrounded by 6 angels. And that's pretty much the prototype for it. And it was just something that went from artist to artist, from church to church. Everybody sort of had one. And it served also as what we call the altarpiece. So here we are in the Uffizi with 2 of the major ones, Cimabue and Giotto. But how did this happen where all these great sort of religious pieces, these works that we would pray in front of, wind up in museums and not in our churches anymore? Here we are again. These are the same paintings that were portrayed in the Sir Friedrich Leighton painting of the procession for the same icon, as it were. And they're seen as something else now, I think, and which is good in a sense, but it's also, they're being underused. I sometimes feel like a lot of these great religious pieces, I know they're precious and we have to preserve them in every way we can. But on the other hand, there's got to be a better way of doing this. As we know, our early Christian painting was an underground art form, and rarely did anything with the Our Lady. It was mostly Christ and the apostles and martyrs, of course, but not Our Lady. She comes in much later, and it's through the Orthodox. When I did the Rosary talk last October, there was something that is very interesting. We share the Rosary with the Orthodox, but a little different in terms of the mysteries. But
Anthony, I don't want to interrupt, but your screen is not sharing your slides. So
are you serious? Oh boy. Okay. Oh, so let me
just hit the screen sharing.
I did before. Oh, now well, I had to start all over again. Boy. So I've got to start. Is now? Can you see it now?
Yep. Perfect.
Great. All right. Now I got to start all over. And this is what, pause share. Resume share. All right. See, I don't understand. These controls are not working for me tonight in terms of going back. There we go. Slower. I mean, why it's so slow, I don't know. But I'm sorry, I had no idea. But anyway, I'll continue that these great masterpieces of church art. Here we go again with the Sir Frederick Light and the procession of the Cimabue through the streets of Florence, and why it was such an important event. Like I said, these icons have a presence to them. So parading Our Lady through the streets for one day and giving it all this exposure was something very important to the Catholic society at the time. And you can see there's a portable altar with 2 candles on it as well. And but now these great things are in museums and being protected, of course, and being conserved and all those things, because God knows that we'd hate to think of what would happen to them if they were in churches that had public access today. We're seeing so much destroyed. But anyway, the thing is that what are we doing? What have we replaced them with? And why don't we have this veneration or devotion any longer? If we do, we're not exposing it in that sense. Again, a museum filled with Maesta paintings and altarpieces. The Maesta comes from the word majesty, so it's always Our Lady enthroned. And I was saying a bit earlier, here's an example of catacomb art. I'm getting a signal saying your screen sharing is paused. Are you seeing my screen share?
I see Our Lady.
Oh boy, I have no idea what just happened.
So your screen, you are screen sharing.
But the images aren't moving?
So far, there's a lion.
Okay, well, what was before?
It was Our Lady in repose.
Okay, let me go back to that. I've never had this many problems before. Okay. I was saying earlier that we share things a little bit differently between the Latin Church and the Orthodox, and that is when it comes to what they refer to as the Dormition of the Virgin. She's always represented in dormition, in repose, with Christ there holding his mother's soul. That would be, for example, that is considered the fourth glorious mystery, or what we call the Assumption. So the Assumption and Dormition are very, very similar between the two. The next one, which we call the Carnation, is the Theotokos Enthroned, which is now sort of the reverse of this, where Our Lady is enthroned and being crowned. So here we have this wonderful icon of the Dormition of the Virgin. Is everybody seeing this now?
Yes, yep,
okay,
it's great.
All right. In icon form. And here, this is very interesting. This particular icon is painted by none other than El Greco when he was still doing icon painting. And as you can see, it's the Dormition. He has Christ inclined. It's not the most typical of positions here. And Our Lady enthroned and surrounded by angels. So he's sort of more or less combining the two of the Assumption and the Coronation, or Dormition and the Enthronement. It's a detail of the El Greco. I could not get anything clearer. Sorry about that. Here it is again. So the themes are Our Lady enthroned, the Dormition of the Virgin, the Coronation, and the Assumption. And when you start to look at these Maesta paintings, here's an Ethiopian one, incredible. She's also the lactating Madonna. So it's a tradition that seems to be cross-cultural once it started, the idea of Our Lady in Majesty. There's a wonderful Byzantine icon in mosaic. But it's pretty much the same and continues. Sometimes the throne is done in a very, very elaborate way to represent the church. This is the cathedra, the seat. And sooner or later, we start to see her in this sort of Byzantine Coptic way, surrounded by other saints as well and angels. The first time I see it in sort of a more Western form is again by Cimabue, and it's in the Basilica in Assisi, the Basilica of St. Francis, and it's the first time in Western art where a saint is represented on the same level with the Maesta, same level meaning same space, and a blue sky. It's not gold here. This is the entry into sort of the Renaissance canon of painting things in actual light and in actual space. And here we have the three of them together: the Cimabue, the Giotto, and the Duccio. Three of the most famous, and you can see the similarities with them, with this idea of the angels on the side holding or supporting this throne. Of course, we're not dealing in the Italy-Byzantine. You're still not using perspective because you don't have anything diminished. This is eternity, so that nothing diminishes. It's all intentional. It's not because they didn't know, and in fact, anybody who knows Byzantine iconographers, they still do reverse perspective. The Maesta start to develop into a sort of what we call sacred conversation, where there's a stasis that happens, where there's not any conversation. We call it sacred conversation for that, but you can start to see the different patrons by their attributes: St. John the Baptist, St. Mary Magdalene, on and on, surrounding Our Lady and Christ Child. Here's the famous Duccio Maesta in Siena. And again, surrounded by our various patron saints, St. Michael, St. John the Baptist always included, various bishops or even patrons on the lower part. So we have a selection, or we have a canon in a way, where Our Lady in this tradition is larger. She's seated. Everyone else is either kneeling or standing. Above, we have different angels and scenes from the life of the Virgin. So you can read it from left to right, of the Annunciation, the Visitation, on and on, until we get back to the Dormition of the Virgin. Here's a beautiful detail of it. Now I have to say, this particular Duccio Maesta is in a room by itself, and you can just sit in front of it as long as you want. It's very dimly lit. It retains, and the way it's let me go back to that. The way it's displayed really retains that sense of meditation, and I admire the Sienese for allowing it to be seen that way, instead of overly lit and in a museum space with other people. You sit in front of it, and you could be in prayer if you choose to. We start to get variations of it where, again, Our Lady's in the center, larger than the two saints, John the Baptist on one side and St. Francis on the other. You're going to find out that, especially in Italian Maesta paintings, they're the patron saints of Italy. So both are most frequently in sacred conversation paintings. Here's St. Dominic and St. Francis. And we start to see the change in the angelic presence. Here's St. Francis and St. Clare. when it changes from the Byzantine to the Latin Church, and this inclusion of course, they're not gilded, although they could have been. Um, this inclusion of a blue background, which means it's in our time, and the sizes between the figures is getting closer as well, which is it really is about, it becomes more incarnational in a sense, where Our Lady is present with us. Here's another sort of more Byzantine version where the as you can see, the adorers are all much smaller than Our Lady, as in the Carnation here. And of course, this is still in situ. We start to get also into a triptych or polytych, as we see as this goes on and on. Again, always changing back and forth between scales. This is a famous Masaccio Maesta painting. And I want you to pay attention to the halos here, because this was another big shift in sacred art, where if we look at Our Lady and we look at the angels, their halos are all circles and parallel to the picture plane and parallel to us. Unfortunately, it was part of a very large altarpiece polytych, and part of the problem with polytychs is they get busted up for different reasons at different times. This is what it was like when it was all together. So, and these are the pieces that we know of, but they're still not together. Only the Masaccio is in one place, in the Uffizi. So here's Our Lady's halo again. But the Christ halo starts to change in the, I would say after Francis of Assisi, where it's in perspective. By the Byzantines, halos that are perfect circles facing us are the way they are to be. In perspective means that it's in time. So when we look at, again, only the Christ figure in this Maesta painting is in both eternity and time. So there's a crossover that continues throughout the Renaissance. I don't like to think of it as a style, but I like to think of it more on a systemic theology level of systemic theology of what are we saying in terms of time and space. Here's the Simone Martino on one side, Da Vinci on the other. Da Vinci always does halos in perspective. It's not necessarily because he understood perspective as much as, well, he understood it, of course, but also it was the East and West separating themselves, again, a little bit more in terms of iconography. Here's the Masaccio as it is today, reframed and out of its polytych altarpiece setting. Masaccio, in terms of perspective, also understood greatly the idea of presence and eye level. So when we see these, let me get this, hide that if I can. Yeah, there we go. Okay, good. Putting the actual viewer at an eye level that corresponds to the eye level set in the painting. So this is his famous Trinity painting in Santa Maria Novella with the two donors on the side, and on the bottom, the skeleton that reads, I am what you were, you will be what I am. So there's always this sort of reminder of time, a memento mori, as it were, as it would be. Fra Angelico, again, in the Italo-Byzantine tradition, does halos that are parallel to the picture plane. I don't think I cannot find a Fra Angelico that is in where the halos are in perspective. But Our Lady is there's a combination that continues where if Our Lady is seated, the other figures, and I've said this, are either kneeling or standing. Very rarely are they seated, and they're not seated at exactly the same level. Here we have them more or less standing at the same level, which is acceptable as long as she is seated higher. Again, Fra Angelico's coronation. So as I said, it's the Assumption, the coronation, the Dormition, and the Assumption. They're the four themes that we'll see over and over again. So here, oops, sorry. Here we have the coronation and Assumption. There's the tomb on the bottom of Our Lady with the apostle staring in there. See the empty tomb. This particular fresco, Our Lady of the Shadows, and I had an experience last year at San Marco, where a school teacher was taking these very young children. I'd say they're 8, 9, 10, and she asked them about the shadows, because that's the title of it, Our Lady of the Shadows. And she asked them something very interesting, which is, what time of day is it in this painting? And they all knew right away. It was amazing. Because the shadows are so long, it's either early morning or late afternoon when the sun is lower. I was really, really impressed. And that is something, I mean, if that happens, I think if you hang around Florence long enough, you're going to really start responding to the natural light there and what kinds of shadows are cast. So I see why Fra Angelico would call this Our Lady of the Shadows. And of course, the science of light and shade is increasing as well, as we're moving away from the pure Byzantine model. Christ gets a cruciform nimbus here. Again, parallel to the picture plane to the viewer. But the idea of how does cast shadow, shade and shadow work becomes a greater theme as we move forward. Now, the idea of this kind of polytic spreads also to other subjects, recombining where we can have a saint as the center of the altarpiece, depending on the patron, usually. Fra Angelico's coronation starts to include other saints. The thing about Sacred Conversation, especially with Fra Angelico, that I find so intriguing is they're not even looking at each other, and they're still in this silent conversation. So the conversation is internal. The Sacred Conversation paintings, this one, again, Our Lady and the saints are all about the same size. The angels are diminished here. Another Fra Angelico example. I think the one Sacred Conversation painting that struck me most of all when I was studying in Florence was the one by Domenico Veneziano. It's again not in its original home, which was the Church of St. Lucy in Florence. It's a fresco, but it was an altarpiece. And I found the light and the perspective. This is the Sacred Conversation of St. Lucy. So that's the title. And again, St. John the Baptist, patron saint of Florence, and St. Francis, patron saint of Italy, with San Zenobi and St. Lucy. This is a portrait of Domenico Veneziano, who was really quite an interesting painter, and did one commission after another. There's a letter that he wrote to Cosimo de' Medici asking for a commission. They're not sure if he commissioned this particular painting or not, but he did grant him a commission. And here we have Our Lady's halo again in perspective. I think what fascinates people is how you can enter this painting from the ground plane. And here's a diagram of just the tile work in perspective that he had laid out. Some details of St. John and St. Lucy. Now here it gets more and more involved as these halos are being tipped the way they would if a circle or circular object were on the back of the head of a saint. So it pulls us in more and brings us more involved in the conversation, as it were. Another master of perspective, but also of sacred art, is Pierre Della Francesca. I don't know of anybody who did so much work in perspective, and it's never been published, unfortunately. I've seen a page of it or two in the Morgan Library, and that's about it. This is his Brera Maesta altarpiece. Again, the use of perspective in here to bring us in. Very static, but then there's another sense because of the light and air in the painting. There's St. Jerome, St. John the Baptist, St. Francis again, St. John the Evangelist. The angels, though, are four standing figures in the background. And here's the Christ child. This one's a little different because she has him sleeping. Angels in Pierre Della Francesca, you can see little bits of wings in the background there. But they get pearls and all kinds of stuff. It's very interesting approach on how to paint those angels from the Byzantine to, and this is of course the Duke of Fernando da Forza. The inclusion of patrons becomes important in Maesta paintings as well. But not just patrons, they're penitents. They're offering these things. They want to be remembered. Here's, I think this is one of the most famous Pierre Della Francesca paintings by itself. And we're going to see more and more of this, where we know paintings by a detail, or especially in a politic that was broken up. But Our Lady of Mercy, of Misericordia, this is the Misericordia politic, is always Our Lady's, always usually larger, and the penitents or the donors are seen as smaller. Here's the entire politic reconstructed, unfortunately, again, it's too many parts are missing. They sometimes get divided up, and this piece goes to this museum and that goes to another museum. This one is intact. This is a Mantegna at the Ferrari. And again, you can see his use of perspective. Sometimes when artists would use this triptych idea, they would use the outer columns and repeat them on the inside. We see that, we're going to see that again in Bellini, who's a real master of it, and the predella on the bottom. So it's the altarpiece, but the bottom piece becomes called the predella, with scenes that relate to the inside as well. Predella is also the word for the step ascending the altar. You know, so a priest would say, I must ascend the predella. Here's his drawing, Mantegna's drawing for the San Zeno altarpiece. This one's different because he, as you can see, he changed the head of St. Peter to look out to us in a sort of invitational, confrontational way. Here's a diagram of the construction. and of course, Da Vinci doesn't actually get to do, but he tries. His knowledge of anatomy, he gives the whole map here of standing, seated, kneeling, standing, seated, kneeling. It's not very difficult. In fact, this was one of the things when we had our course in Chicago that one summer with Sacred Art. Well, at that time it was the Guild, but now the Institute. And the Kathleen and the canons hosted us. But this was one of the lessons of how to draw from memory and draw 3 different kinds of figures for sacred conversation paintings. And of course, a master at light and shade, a master of drapery. He had all the parts. The problem was not quite sure what happened with the Saint Anne cartoon, but that would have been the closest thing to a Maesta painting. He was to do it for Santissima Annunziata in Florence. I know he was very, very excited from what history says on doing it. It is an incredible work, and one now that starts to include Saint Anne the Virgin, Christ Child, and Saint John the Baptist. I have to say, this is probably one of the most haunting works I've ever seen. It's in London in the National, and it's in a very, very, very dark room. When you go in, you really don't see anything, and you have to just wait, and your eyes will adjust, and slowly this image comes out. This, by the way, like the Dali crucifixion painting, somebody went in the room and shot it a few years back. They actually shot the drawing. Thank God it was behind bulletproof glass. It did fracture the paper a bit, but it goes along with what Dali always says. This kind of beauty would push a crazy man over the edge. Someone's disturbed. I shouldn't say crazy like that, but someone who has so much pent-up anger, this kind of beauty would just push them.
What's the title of this painting?
It's called the Saint Anne cartoon.
Okay, so it's a cartoon.
Yeah, the Saint Anne cartoon. And he did it, it supposedly was exposed at Santissima Annunziata, but one of the friars there was a little bit perturbed because Da Vinci turned to his assistant and said, "Oh, we must start, doing this and all for the varnish and the oils," and because of course we know that those things would take time to prepare. And the friar was very upset. He said, "This man thinks of the end before the beginning." Well, that's sometimes how you do things in art, so I do them anyway. But this idea of doing a stereometric figure like Dürer on the left here, and Carlo di Urbino learning the proportions and range of movements over and over and over again. Now everybody knows this famous drawing by Dürer, the praying hands, but what did it go to? And again, it's a part of a diptych or a polytych in a way. No, this is, excuse me, triptych. I'm not sure if the bottom 2 panels are separated or not, but it's again, Our Lady. This is combination of Assumption, Dormition. You can see the empty tomb on the bottom, and Coronation. So we're getting better at combining these themes. So we're not sure, but everybody thinks he reversed this figure, but used the drawing. And then the feet on the bottom, the feet aren't as popular as those hands, but those hands are, if he had one mark for every drawing or whatever, that reproduction that's sold for them. This is a David Gerard, who does another variation of a Maesta, but this is called Virgin of Virgins, excuse me. Virgin of Virgins. And now I've tried to remember, I can't. It's kind of complicated, but every one of these virgins is a virgin saint. Their attributes aren't as clear as some are in other paintings, but he had a name for every one of them. Very, very incredible. There he put himself in the background of the painting. That's David Gerard. But the Flemish school is certainly, especially as it changes into oil painting, temperate and oil combined. There's another Virgin of Virgin painting this is by the Master of the St. Lucy legend. And we can see in the foreground, that's St. Agnes. She's got the lamp and she's in red. That one I can detect. I would say, oh, there's St. Elizabeth of Hungary or St. Barbara, depends. And that's because of the wheel on her cloak. St. Lucy's in the green with her eyes on the plate. The one sitting next to St. Lucy is St. Agatha. She's got the pliers. So an artist would have to know all these various attributes in order to pull something like this off. And that's something that I'd like to discuss also in a little bit, because we're not including them as much as we can or should. So we're depending much too much on the photograph for these things. So we know it's Padre Pio simply because we know what he looked like in the photograph. The Grunwald triptych is, as we know, is just one of the wonders of the world, with the Annunciation, the Nativity, and the Resurrection. Just the Resurrection figure alone is just an amazing feat. One of the painters of Sacred Conversation paintings is Raffaello's teacher, and that's Pergino. Pergino always had a very definite linear aspect and just a sense of stasis, that where everyone is looking off in a completely different direction, but everywhere as well. Again, it's that internalization of the moment. And he's doing Coronation, Assumption, and Death of the Virgin there, surrounded by angels. Another one with St. Francis and St. Bonaventure. Del Sarto is probably one of my favorite artists of all. He has a sense of animation. He's sort of the opposite of Pergino, where there's more interaction, more movement. And what's interesting is I like to find the drawings, if there are any, for these various paintings, because you can see how they changed. They changed their mind from the drawing to the painting or the sculpture. In the drawing, the John the Baptist figure is leaning backwards and the painting is leaning forwards. Here is this idea of interaction is very prevalent with the Del Sarto way of thinking. His student, Fra Bartolomeo, who also was under Fra Angelico, does lots and lots and lots of studies. There was a show at the Met some years back of just Fra Bartolomeo drawings, and it was a vast number of all preparatory sketches, a lot of drapery. So, you start to realize that what the ingredients are. It's understanding the proportions of the human figure, the differences in standing, seated, and kneeling, drapery on those figures, light and shade. Here's a grisaille of Fra Bartolomeo. Now, what happens here is he's allowing another saint to hold the Christ child as Our Lady is looking upward. And of course, there's John the Baptist. Is that Saint Elizabeth? I don't think she would appear young, but John the Baptist is looking at both Christ child and the other female saint. The Ghent altarpiece, just one of the most amazing works that we know of. Again, in the museum behind glass, so it's very difficult to see. But here, Our Lady is on one side, and Christ the King is centered in the middle. Two crowns, the triple tiara on his head, and the other crown on the floor, the royalty crown. So Adam and Eve, and then of course the bottom portion, which is the Feast of the Lamb, which is, you can see why it functions so well as an altarpiece. This is a line drawing I found of it. Not that this is not by Van Eyck. But the incredible detail, this idea of and the ability to depict gems and light through, light on, light from, light through an object. I'm going to be talking about that more in my upcoming talk, the story of light and dark with St. Patrick's Art and Lens series. Now the issue with polytics is they come in parts. And so I've got a choice of one idea on one side, and the other, which is more of an altarpiece with another frame. And in all my research, it seems that anything that can come apart is taken apart sooner or later, or falls apart. So, word to the wise: if you ever get commissioned to do an altarpiece or any sort of multi-figure composition, try to get it in one piece. This was at Santa Croce at some point in time, and most of it is missing. Now, again, this is a painting that in art history we all know very well because of that simple invention of St. Lucy holding her eyes as a flower, as a bloom. But again, like the hands of Dura, but in this case, probably even worse, it's missing, or everything else is missing. And it took a very long time, just recently, in fact, and then the show got postponed because of COVID. It took 9 museums to put this polytic back together again, the Grifoni polytic. It's just amazing that this kind of thing happened, and how it happened, I'm not sure. There's not quite a lot of history as to how and why these things happen. Here it is at the temporary show, and you can see the St. Lucy on the right of your screen. But it's sort of like a reunion of orphans or something when I look at these. I can't help thinking anything else. Can we just stop looking at them as, this is going to sound strange, as art for a moment. This is a Bellini triptych. This is intact, and this is in its the Church of the Frari in Venice. It has remained there ever since. But you can see his use of this sort of space where he continues the perspective of the frame into the painting. So it's with the same lighting. So it's this idea of actual and implied form, actual implied space, actual and implied light. Again, to give us a sense of presence and witness. Here's another Bellini. This time it's St. John the Baptist as the center, probably again for an altar or shrine dedicated to St. John the Baptist. This is the Pizarro altarpiece by Bellini, and so we have the Coronation of the Virgin on the bottom, and Suffering Christ in Repose. This is usually sort of like what we call Christ's Holy Saturday theme here. Cool. Why won't it move, please?
And are these saints that are flanking the main figure?
Yes, I'm trying to get my something. I didn't pause. Okay. Here we go. Come on. Your screen is paused. I don't want to pause. Resume. Come on. There we go. Yes. Both on both sides, the smaller ones. There's Saints Peter and Paul. There's Saint. I can't get the close up here. It's Saint Francis on the other side. And then the city of Pizarro in the background. And here's the detail of Mary Magdalene. And I don't recognize the other two saints. Again, sometimes, here's the problem. It's been taken apart. So this Christ of Holy Saturday on one side, as you can see in the top panel, is no longer there, and it's being housed in the Vatican Museum. Why, how it was taken apart, I don't know. Here's the predella with St. Terence and St. Jerome on the other time. These are two details. St. George, there's usually a whole story that goes along with it. But be great if they can come together again and be placed in a proper setting. Again, this is a Bellini, and here's here again, he continues the actual architecture into the painting. And luckily for him, this one is marble, so it's not going to get moved around or taken apart. This is Titian. Titian kind of breaks the model and really animates the space and theme again. And so it's this is one of the first ones I know that's on a diagonal. All the patrons are kneeling in adoration on the bottom for worship. But nothing says that we can't use, as we're in Lent now, the Passion of Christ as the central figure here. This is that was a Montaigne drawing. So we could have Sacred Conversation with the crucifixion as the center theme, for sure. This is a Ghirlandaio. So we have Our Lady of Misericordia up top and the deposition on the bottom. Another Bellini, deposition and Sacred Conversation. Pergino again, deposition / Sacred Conversation. Or is this a Pietà? It's not, yes, it's not a deposition, I'm sorry. St. John the Baptist and St. Jerome with Christ of Holy Saturday. So these things, you know, again, we have to keep a sense of having these things outside of time and space. This is the Bouguereau. Again, changes the Maesta from the Christ child to Pietà. And I'd like to talk about how this is possible in a three-dimensional space. This, of course, is Michelangelo and the Medici tombs. And it's hard to get a sense when you're just looking at photos of these different sculptures that surround the place and forget that it is a chapel. It's the Medici chapel. So we see Our Lady with the Christ child and two saints, St. Matthew and I think the other is St. John, I'm not sure. We see the two Medicis. We see Giuliano with his head turned one way, and Lorenzo with his head turned the other. They're actually opposite, but what are they looking at? They're looking at Our Lady. Here's the altar. So imagine this. They're looking at Our Lady enthroned between the saints. So the whole room is surrounded by what I would consider sacred conversation. Sorry, I didn't mean to jump that quickly. Let's look at that again. Unfortunately, you know, I shouldn't say unfortunately, but if you ever get there, and now's a great time because there's not many tourists, of course, but to spend time in there with just a few people or even by yourself is just amazing. You start to sense what was going on there when Mass was being celebrated. Unfortunately, a lot of things happened both between the First World War and the Second World War in Europe, and a lot of great, great masterpieces were destroyed, emptied. And here, this is a lot of this was done in the movie, the recent film of the Monument Men, but it really did happen. And here they are trying to figure out what to do with the Ghent altarpiece so that it doesn't get destroyed. Where do we put these things for safekeeping? Here's a Luini from Monte Cassino, which is, thank God they got it up, because otherwise that would have been destroyed too. Luini was a follower of Da Vinci from Lombardy. Here again is the one of the portions of the Ghent altarpiece taken apart for safekeeping. Pope Pius XII really understood this even before the war. He was very, very concerned in the state of church art because he saw modernism creeping in at the same time. And unfortunately, what happened was because of the devastation of World War II, it came in for sure because people just simply couldn't afford anything. And so he said something that always stuck in my mind when I read it, was that the church is always about invention, but not experimentation. And so, but again, you know, these great cathedrals of Europe got, you can see the lighting that happened. So, well, Your Holiness, we can't afford this and we can't afford that. So the concrete slab altarpiece sort of came into fashion in spite of it. But it was well on its way, especially in the north. When I look at some of the floor plans, et cetera, for modern churches, you could see the ambo on the left there with the hood over it, and whatever's on the right there in terms of statues or heads, maybe fragments, who knows. But that was what was happening to churches in the meantime. And now I think this is what His Holiness was afraid of. And certainly Pope Emeritus Benedict has written about this in the spirit of liturgy, that it can be anything but not non-representational. It must represent something. I don't know what this can represent. It kind of reminds me of just bubbles. Another modernist, approach to a triptych by Keith Haring. And then there's this one, which is just 3 blank canvases. This is a Catholic church in Italy, by the way. No, Spain, excuse me, Spain. Where you just look at 3 blanks.
Thumbs down.
Here's a nativity set. We got stuff to do. We have work to do. This, by the way, is a nativity that I saw in person at the Church of Santo Spirito. That's a Brunelleschi. That's Michelangelo's crucifix in the back. This is Brunelleschi's Church of Santo Spirito in Florence. Here's His Eminence, the Cardinal, at the dedication. Everybody's applauding and clapping. That is their nativity for 2018. But there is some hope. This is a young painter, Kuba Ambrose. He's in Poland right now, and he's very devoted to Our Lady. And this is one of his more current paintings. Again, here's the Grunwald, and these ideas of doing variations of it. These projects were given to some people, and they said, "Oh, we want to do, project and use of photography and this and that to make it more relevant." And we are, for better or for worse, with these wonderful images of our saints and these reminders of our blesseds. But I don't think we're doing too much with them. We're not including them, for example, in any painting with Our Lady or Christ or other saints. Here's Solanus Casey on one side. He's a Franciscan. He could be with St. Francis, and we're not doing that. Or St. Francis Cabrini with other missionary saints. Here's, again, 3 Franciscans. They look very different, but Mother Teresa was sealed by the order of St. Francis of Assisi, and Maximilian Kolbe, and Padre Pio. How about different children who have witnessed apparitions of Our Lady in Majesty? I mean, I'm just making these suggestions. There's St. Bernadette on one side and the children of Fatima on the other. They saw Our Lady differently, but they saw Our Lady. That's the main thing. And Blessed Pier Giorgio. Everything done on him is based on one photograph. And it certainly talks about what they looked like, but not what they became in terms of imitation of Christ or heroic virtue. So I think we have a lot of work to do. We have a lot. These are other people's sketches for an altarpiece. So people are thinking, that's all good. But I really do think, to get to the heart of it, more lessons are involved and direction. We need patrons. But I think if sometimes artists will ask me, how do I get a commission? I always say, give one to yourself first. If you want one, there's always room in your own home. You can say, I'm making this altarpiece for myself, for my home chapel. 2 years ago, I organized a group to go to Florence to draw. This is Pia Soriano. She did some incredible work while there. This is Caroline Neasley. She's transposing a Van Eyck in relief. This was in one of the studio classes. This is Sister Maria in Florence doing proportions and kneeling and standing all together. And this is Brooks Palmer at Santa Maria Novella in Florence, drawing from the frescoes. And Richard Berger, who's doing some incredible things. We went together to the National to draw from the Verrocchio show. So I think there's so much available to us right now. And again, another relief Brooks is doing from anatomy. So this combination of working from anatomy studies. This is a wonderful drawing that Lauren Griffiths did in the studio here. And that's my left-hand drawing from the Verrocchio St. Jerome. This is my attempt, this is done years ago, at a Maesta drawing. And I sort of thought, wouldn't it be interesting to do something about St. Luke painting Our Lady, but he's actually painting it as the Cimabue in perspective. It's sort of like, to me, it was sort of like a, just let me bring together every little trick here and perspective and all those things, and have all the angels, but in just a completely different arrangement. But again, I still teach these things. I think they're very good, easy lessons to learn: standing, seated, kneeling, range of movements. Again, this was teaching in Florence, and you can see on the upper right the arrangement that's starting to take place of standing and kneeling. This again was in Chicago. Oh, sorry for that duplicate. And some years back, I was asked to do an altarpiece, and I came up with this idea of somewhat of a polytic and based on the crucifixion in the middle and the saints below. And so I made this arrangement. It is completed. I mean, excuse me, the construction is completed. That's the center panel crucifixion. And corrugated so it will be freestanding and wouldn't be dependent. So this is sort of an idea of the construction with all wood on top and marble on the bottom. And here it is today. Excuse me, this is some about just an installation. It's done a beautiful rose-colored mahogany and Rojo Corlito marble. But the intention is to make this completed with a communion of saints, and going from left to right, since it is the Church of Our Lady of Guadalupe in Buckingham, PA, we wanted to include as many North American saints and South American saints, as she is the patroness of the Americas. The first crucifix that went up was two-dimensional, but freestanding. And it was decided that that was going to be temporary, and the pastor wanted a three-dimensional corpus. So it'd be this, again, this interplay between two-dimensional and three-dimensional. This is in progress being painted. And here it is getting installed. So we still have these panels on the bottom, and our procession of saints or our communion of saints. Still work to be done, as I said. Anyway, here's the notice, if anyone's interested, for our continued Lenten series of Mondays in Lent with Father Tim in the Dominican friars at St. Patrick's here in Philadelphia. Bone of my bone and flesh of my flesh. It is about how we use the body in Catholic art, in particular. How we use nude, naked, clothed, all of it. Made in the image and likeness does touch about some of the things I touched on tonight, or goes into some of the things I touched on tonight. how do we regain, now that we have the photograph and the image, how do we include the likeness of God in our works? Because our saints take on another identity. Does that mean idealization? There's all sorts of possibilities here, but I think it's worth investigating. Lux et Tenebra, story of light and shade. Light and shade play an incredible role in art and in devotion. You know, as we go from this light from, in terms of gold and luster, light on the object and light through the object. And then last but not least, I'm sorry, my screen's blocked here. The last one is, do you renounce Satan and all his, her empty promises? I've been curious for quite a while as to why the demonic is never portrayed anymore, and how do we expect to fight if we're not shown examples of our saints in history, and of course the different types of demonic oppression we're seeing certainly today. But if we clean this up too much and act as if it doesn't exist, and we don't see our victory over it, it's going to be a little difficult. So I think this is another thing, an area that I hope artists will get involved in at some point in time, and our churches as well. And anyway, that's the future here. So if you want to keep in touch, you can certainly find my website, anthonyviscoartist.com. And for those of you who are already friends with me on Facebook, Lessons of the Florentine Masters is a great sort of conversational group. We're having a lot of fun. So, and exposures in terms of these lessons, they continue online, and it always seems to bring about a good conversation. So I thank you all for coming tonight, and Kathleen and I are gonna open this up to a little Q&A if anyone's interested.
Yes, if anybody has any questions, they can go ahead and unmute themselves and ask them. But I just wanted to thank you, Anthony. That was impressive. That's so many slides, and you obviously put a considerable amount of time into that. And I always learn something, even though I've been studying for a while myself. So thank you very much.
Oh, thank you.
So
thanks. I see Robert up there. Hi, Robert. How are you? Good to see you.
Doing great.
Hi,
Thanks.
Brooks. Hi, Brooks.
That's fantastic.
Thanks. Robert's doing some wonderful things as well. And Robert, your group is called, again, you're on Facebook with your...
Yeah, we are the Stabat Mater Foundation. So I'm working with them down in Tyler, Texas, with Bishop Strickland down here.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and Robert Armetta is up top. Robert, he's an artist, very good painter, and he started a little group for Christian artists as well, and has a Facebook page dedicated to that. Robert, you had Robert Pushin, you had a virtual show. Is that still going on, or how can people access that?
We finished that up recently. So we had an online auction recently, and
oh, nice.
Yeah, so it went well. Thanks.
I'm talking to two Roberts here.
Yeah.
this is being recorded, and so I'm going to post this to YouTube. So if anybody wants to review it again, and Robert, if you want to send me, both of you, links, I'm happy to share those, because I think the more that we can connect ourselves with one another, I think that's a great thing. So I'm always happy to, help cross promote. So
it is important to let people know that there are other people doing this. I think that's it's part of the problem. People think they're all alone in this, and we're not going to find each other through galleries. We know that. And I remember somebody said to me, "Where can I see your work?" And I said, "You have to go to church." And they were insulted. They said, "What are you trying to say, man? I've got to go to church." No, I didn't mean it that way. But maybe you should. It wouldn't hurt.
So I just want to thank you for another wonderful presentation. I always love to hear about and learn more about art. I've been actually to, of course, Belgium because I lived there. So with my high school, I went to see the Lamb's God, and so it kind of brings back the memories that the teachers were trying to teach us. And I was thinking, why am I doing it? What am I doing? Why am I looking at these old paintings? So this is really great to hear, especially as being a seminarian and growing into and myself have appreciation for art. I have to go.
Dennis, by the way, let me interrupt. He's a seminarian here at Teaneck, New Jersey, but he does incredible photography of sacred art and sacred imagery and puts it together in a very beautiful way. You know, if there is a place and a role for it, he's definitely someone who's working on it.
Well, thank you, Anthony. So I have to go to adoration right now. So I just want to say goodbye, but for everyone,
Okay.
and it was so good to reconnect again. So God bless you. And
Alla prossima, okay? You're going to come by? Okay. Bye-bye. Ciao, ciao. He's, we met at St. Rita's Shrine one day, and he's stayed in touch.
Lovely. So does anybody have any questions or comments? If not, I think maybe we can just draw this to a close. And again, this will...
I have a
sorry.
Anthony.
Oh, hi, Lauren. How are you?
Hi, ciao. ¿Cómo estás? When are you?
But let me tell them, we had a great time in Florence going over the Masaccio frescoes there at the Carmine. That was a wonderful afternoon.
Well, we plan to have more.
But
when are you going back?
who knows?
Okay.
Who knows?
Keep me posted because I'll be there.
Oh, great. Well, we'll stay in touch.
Yeah.
I need to talk to you anyway, but okay.
And do you have any classes scheduled for 2021?
Not yet. I'm waiting to see if something lifts or this or that. I'm sort of doing one-on-one things here. I don't know where Brooks was. She's one of the participants. We did have a nice group going when I came back from Florence last January. Everything was going very well. And I set things up here. I had some students and it seemed to be growing. And then I decided to sort of do a home chapel in the room adjacent to the studio. And I found a couple priests, in fact, Father Dennis, who was just on the seminary, all have agreed, yeah, you want to have class and a mass afterwards? No problem. And then the whole COVID thing hit and we had to sort of back off. But we're going to get it, going again.
Okay, keep me posted because I have a chapel that that had damage in the apse. So yeah, it's near Volterra.
Oh, we like Volterra.
So they received damage and now they're looking for a contemporary, right? But in representative style. So
okay, by contemporary, do they mean living?
They mean living
because
currently.
That's what the document meant. Didn't mean
they mean living currently.
A living artist. So
yes.
when people say to me, do you do contemporary art? I say I had no choice. I woke up today,
Thank you for doing this.
Oh,
this
sure. Thanks for joining us.
Robert, I think it's your turn.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask for, whenever I listen to one of your lectures, I'm like, what are resources that you can point us to grow in this knowledge? I mean, I recently read a book by Anna Jameson on sacred and legendary art, but some of the stories that you've brought up about these artists, do you have any books that you can point us to maybe some of the, maybe a key one or two that you can...
There's some of it I just sort of, one of the biggest influences when I was studying was the Ferguson book, Signs and Symbols of Christian Art. And he uses examples in the National Gallery here in DC, but there's also a little bit of story going on there. So it allowed me to recognize our saints, like in these Sacred Conversation paintings, by their attributes. And that, of course, makes me think of, well, what are the attributes today? For, you know, I mean, we're looking at Carlo Acutis, and you're doing art on him already, both two-dimensional and three-dimensional, and his attribute is an Apple laptop. We've got to come up with a little bit better than that. So, but the other book, I'm sorry, Robert, the other book that inspired me was a little dry. It's a book by Sir Anthony Blunt, Artistic Theory in Italy from 1450 to 1600. And it shows the transition between the Renaissance, let's say, for lack of a better term, and the Baroque or Counter-Reformation art. What happened and what did the Council of Trent say in particular? So I think if more come to mind, I'll definitely email you on that, okay?
Great. I'm going to get those. Appreciate
Okay.
it.
All right. Anyone else? Okay. Any recommendations for other talks that you'd like to hear? Please let me know. Because I do like this medium a lot. I mean, this is great because I don't know how many we had tonight altogether, but the first time I did it with the Dominicans, because we would do it in the old school that they still have there. And if we were lucky, maybe we could fit 20 people in the room with even people standing. But when we started to do the Zoom thing, I mean, we got 77 on our first try. It was not bad. So it can include more people. And then I get to hear people like tonight with you all making comments. It's really helpful. So thanks again.
Well, thanks to you again, Anthony.
All right, we'll stay in touch.
Yeah, will do. Oh, wait, thanks to everybody for participating tonight. And those that
See you,
also,
Mary Frances. Thank you.
Thank you. It's
Okay.
wonderful to see you.
Same here. Same here. God bless. Take
God
care.
bless you.
See you,
Okay.
Brooks.
Bye-bye. Thank you so much.
Okay, take care. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye.
Good night, all. Good night.
Good night.
Right.
Bye-bye.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.